Hello there. This is MD. Here with you on SaskiYano. Here we go again. We are in a new After Effects tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm gonna pick up right where I left off in the last tutorial and talk to you about some more very useful effects you're gonna be turning to all of the time in After Effects. Alright. Let's talk about green screen. Green screen, something that at some point you are going to want to do it in After Effects. So let's take a look at this example. Really quick. You can see that down here my timeline. I actually have a pre-comp. And let me jump in here first and show you what I have going on in my pre-comp. Alright. So this is my pre-composition. The reason why I did it this way is because a lot of times when you are chroma keying footage, which is what this is called, you don't need to deal with the entire green screen. Or maybe you're not even shooting an entire green screen. This could be like a small portable background on somebody. This is not a green screen tutorial. But if you want to learn more about green screen, I will leave a video for you in the comments down below. But let me show you some of these great effects here. The first one I have applied is called Selective Color. And I'm using that to juice up this green color. Because you can see without it, this green is very dull. So sometimes using a tool like Selective Color can be used to juice up the background and help you pull a little bit better of a key. Not always. But it's an option. Just want to show you that there. Then I'm using a really simple key effect. It's called Color Key. You can see if I turn on the transparency grid, we are getting some transparency there. I'm just gonna turn that off. Because that's just a little bit too busy. For me. The color key is not an effect you would use to key this entire image. I jack this up all the way to where it's pulling all of the green. You can see. But that's just not gonna work. What I'm doing instead is I'm using it to essentially give me a garbage map. Instead of drawing a mask around my guy here and animating it so that his hands don't go out of the mask. Which could be done. And often is done. That's too much work for this particular application. And can be done very simply with a few effects. Like Color K. And I can throw another color key on here. With a little bit different of a shade. And another one. And get essentially a 97% of all the green pixels out of here. You can see there's a little bit of jazz left over. And didn't make a real mass of the edge here. And that's what I'm using Simple Choker for. Which does a little matte choking. It helps me to create a nice little edge here. And so, now all I have to do is deal with the edge around my guy. Much easier. So I jump back to this comp here. I'm using 3 very powerful effects. The first one is Key Light. So Key Light is doing the key. And it's a much more advanced key than Color Key. It's got a ton of options. Way more than I have time to go into right now. And so, that is giving me a nice key around my guy here. It's not completely destroying the edge. You can see. When I turn that on. It's doing an alright job. And most of the settings are actually left at their defaults. One major thing I want to draw your attention to is I changed this from Final Process like this to Intermediate Final Result. And Key Light does a little bit of color correction and edge cleanup here. And I want to do that because there's a better way to do that in After Effects. The next effect I'm using is called Key Cleaner. Now watch what happens to the edge here. Let's look down here. I'll undo that. Put it back. You see that Key Cleaners do a couple things. It's filling in some holes. You can see that I did have a hole punched through this guy. But it is reflecting the green screen. And so that is punching a hole. You can see my fancy magenta background here. It's fixing up some holes. It's also cleaning up this edge. Now I was looking at 200%, which can be dangerous. When you're doing keys. You can see down here. I do have some transparency issues. Key Cleaner is helping with that. It's not perfect. It could still use some tweaking. But it's getting the most of the way there. And finally, I am gonna scroll back to another frame here so you can see. I have advanced spill suppressor. If you look carefully, you can see on my guy here. At the very edge, there's a little bit of green bleed. Coming from the light from the screen. It's bouncing back. It's hard to see. You can see if I zoom way up to 100%. There's a little bit of green there. Advanced spill suppressor fixes that. Now, there's definitely more to explore with Chrome Key. But I did just want to touch on these very useful tools. And those are get you really good results. Alright. Let's talk about generate. I threw together a composition here. With a handful of effects that are under the generate heading. Or the generate folder. If you will. And all of these generate something. So for example. In this first layer here. The effect that I'm using is called Fractal Noise. And it generates a fractal noise pattern. There's a bunch of different options here. Fractal noise is like one of those effects that can be used for so many things in After Effects. You can use it for all kinds of different effects, to drive animations, or just create a background for something. If you're curious, just look up some fractal noise tutorials, and you'll find a bunch of great stuff you can do with fractal noise. I'm using in this case to just generate this fractal noise using a dynamic fractal type. The default is kind of this. I don't know. Just kind of static noise looking thing. But I change it to dynamic because this kind of bloomy sort of noise pattern. Then I'm using a color correction effect called Coloroma to give it this colorization here. Finally, I'm using a tint effect and knock down the saturation just a little bit. And I did this just to show you one thing you could do with a fractal noise. You can make this kind of lava texture here. You can animate this. Fractal noise is a great effect. It's worth exploring. It's worth looking into for all kinds of really cool effects that you can use it to build on. Or just use it for a background. Alright. What we have next. Gradient ramp. Very simple effect. Now, you know if you have watched the shapes tutorial. You can make gradients using a shape layer. However, there's lots of times when they may make more sense to use a solid. And this effect's called gradient ramp, which generates a linear gradient or radial gradient. One of the things that I like about this effect that shape layers does not have is if I zoom in it really tight, you can see that there's a little noise in here. And that's done on purpose. Here is option here called ramp scatter, and that essentially takes a noise pattern and mixes that into your gradient. And you're thinking, why would I want to do that? I mean, that looks gross. And yes, that much ramp scattered does look pretty gross. However, when you're working on compositions in 8-bit per channel, there's only 256 shades of gray that you have available. That's what 8-bit is. There's only 256 levels in 8 bits. And so, if you're using a gradient, you will often see banding, where you get these kind of lines. And you're probably going to see it in the compression. I don't see it on my screen, but I can see my screen recording software that it is banding a little bit. Then when this gets compressed for the web, you may see that even greater. So one of the ways you can get rid of that is by using a ramp scatter here, right on the gradient. You can do this another way. You can use a noise on top of this. However, this is built right in. It renders very fast. And it just works. Alright. What we have next? We have the 4-color gradient effect. This is a really nice effect here. It's got a ton of animatable features. And again, when you're looking at these effects, treat them as building blocks. You know, you don't see this and go, man, that After Effects. It's the best thing I've ever seen. Because you know, honestly, this is not that great. You can see. You could create a really nice ambient background. If I said the other colors. To you know, some kind of oranges. And reds. And animated. This yellow here. Around you can create kind of a nice ambient. Cool looking background. You can put behind some text or something. Lots of different options. For these. Alright. How about the checkerboard effect? This is great for all your checkerboard needs. And you can change this. And modify this to do all manner of creative things, from checkerboards to different checkerboards. Just get tons of stuff you can do this. And feather this out. Further the height. And the width. And use this drive other effects. Are just great and interesting background. Alright. Let's look at grid. Grids and other basic effect. For lots of different line and grid type needs. You may not always need a grid. Or grid that looks like this. But there's lots of different ways that you can use this grid. For example, maybe you just need some, I don't know, some vertical or horizontal lines. Well, no problem. You could do that faster with shape layers than what I just did there. Now, this doesn't work like shape layers. Because this is not continuously rasterizable. If I increase the scale of this, it'll get pretty nasty looking. However, for a lot of things, this is quick and gets the job done. And you can use multiple instances of this grid and change the border and the blend mode to get a really nice looking grid or a line pattern. It's very cool. And finally, and this is not finally, for the generator effects. Because you can see there's a heck of a lot more than I'm not gonna get into. I want to show you the Scribble Effect. Because I think it's pretty cool. The Scribble Effect is on a solid. All of these are black solids. And I've created a basic path here. And if I just preview this for couple seconds, you can see that has this kind of wiggled kind of scribble effect, which is pretty cool. Lots of different options on how this looks, and the color, and the thickness, and the angle. And you can make it look just how you want. For all kinds of creative scribbling stuff. You can also throw a stroke over top of this, which is another generate effects right here. And you can use this stroke effect and set it to reveal image. And check this out. You can do kind of a ride on. For this stroke, there's lots of different ways to do ride on the effects inside of After Effects. And this is just one of them. And it's pretty cool looking. So you can animate this. And you can animate your path. And you can come up with all kinds of creative stuff to do with these effects. Finally, we are done for today. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and leave your comment down below in the comments section. Also, if you want to learn more, take a look at our first channel, Everything PS. See you next time. Bye.